returning to open session. We do not have any reportable action items from closed session at this time. At the end of our meeting, the board will reconvene into closed session to finish the work there. Can I ask for a motion for approval of the agenda, including time limits, please?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. It passed. Next on the agenda, we have, usually we have student trustee reports. And after the student trustee reports, each trustee reports on what he or she may have done the previous period, and at that time shares with the other board, things that they think would be helpful to the board members. And you'll have to excuse me, I'm shuffling paper, been running around, but I wanted to do it in reverse order tonight so that we could maybe have a little bit more focused. I do want to announce first, before I get started, that the Marin County Office of Education is putting out, or I shouldn't say putting out, they are sponsoring and hosting a sexual harassment prevention training. It'll be March 13th, 2018 from 7:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. And I think we'll be getting more information about this. I think they're also looking at not just for staff, but for students as well. The one thing I wanted to mention as well is that I know that people have asked us about the status of the investigation that's ongoing. We have no information to share at this time. Those usually take time. But rest assured, we will be sharing that with you in weeks to come. It's clear that we've experienced and witnessed a number of events over the last few weeks, and I want to take time to reflect with you and my fellow board members what the board's responsibilities are. We are supposed to be democratic representation of the community we serve and to set direction for the district. We are responsible also for representing the citizens who are not old enough to vote. We routinely at board meetings reevaluate and revisit our board policy. Within the last couple of months, we updated our anti-discrimination and harassment policies, and just last month we updated our no guns on campus policy. We expect these policies to be followed. I have a very short statement that I'd like to read to you because over the last few weeks I've been reflecting about this board in particular, my co-board members, and how we operate and what our values are. Maintaining safe, supportive, and secure learning and working environments is our highest priority as trustees of the TAM district. Open, two-way, mutually respectful communication is crucial in fostering a school culture and climate that ensures that all voices can be heard. In that process, we need to reinforce to students and staff that they can raise concerns knowing that they will be taken seriously and that we will deal with those concerns appropriately. Freedom of expression and speech is a core value in our schools. Freedom of speech must be exercised in a safe, solution-oriented manner so that disruption is not the end product, but awareness and collaboration are the results. Our role as responsible board and community is to make those conversations teachable moments that build bridges of understanding and open lines of communication. And when I refer to teachable moments, I'm referring to students as well as all the adults and staff in our community as a whole. So earlier I said that part of our role is to not only represent the community we serve, but to represent those that can't vote. The way I like to think of it too is that, like with any organization, usually you see the top layer, and in the school district you'll often see that the trustees are at the top, followed by the superintendent, then the assistant superintendent, the principals, the teachers, and the students. And I think it's more appropriate that we flip that organizational chart and remind ourselves while we're all here tonight, the students are at the top of the organization. And I didn't prepare, I didn't give you a heads up, but I think one thing that we as board members would really like to hear tonight is not only some of your successes, and I know that San Andreas in particular, you have something to share with us tonight. I won't steal your thunder and say what it is, but we're all very excited. But on those topics of gun safety, I did go to the TAM High Vigil and the Me Too. We would love as board members, and I'm sure the people in the audience, to hear how you as student trustees look at this. If you've had any feedback from your fellow students, if you are looking at how you would like to support, if you'd like to support the national movement with the students on 2 events, this is a time that we would like to hear more from you than you hear about what we've done the last 2 weeks. So I want to hand it over to whoever would like to jump at the microphone first, and we would love to hear.
So I'll go first. I was planning to say that Tam High we had a vigil after the shooting at Parkland. It was very well attended, and we just wanted to give our fullest support for the students that survived, and we wanted to let the families of the students that didn't know that they have our thoughts and prayers. Also, we as students are very concerned about how easily accessible guns are. For kids my age, 18, who can purchase a very violent weapon and do a lot of damage. And we fully support the board putting out a no guns on campus statement. Also, we are having a shooter on campus drill this Thursday, and in the past these drills have not been taken very seriously, but in recent light we hope that they will be taken much more seriously, as we have all seen it could happen even to schools like ours, especially since we've already had many threats of violence this past year. Now, in lighter news, we would like to congratulate the Tam High mountain bike team, which had a very successful meet over break. Also, the improv show at Tam recently came to a close, and the government inspector will open in 2 weeks. The baseball team season just ended after they lost a big game over the break. We have another Unity Day on the 23rd, which I think that everyone is looking forward to. It will be a way for us to come together. Also, we're trying to use it to spark conversations about race, which has been a theme throughout the year. But this Unity Day, I think we're also going to try to spark a conversation about sexism and how that plays a role in our community with implicit bias. But we are having our spring sports rally on the 16th, which is the week before Unity Day. And this year we're going to have Spirit weeks before the rally, and we're going to try to also pair that with a fundraiser. We think that we're going to try to raise money for Planned Parenthood again, since that worked out well with the Valentine's Day grant. And also, students have finished signing up for their classes for the next year, and we're trying to make a very smart master schedule this year. And we would like to wish good luck to the spring sports, the swim team, diving team, wrestling team, golf team, lacrosse team, volleyball team, baseball team, and softball team, all of which have games this week. So, thank you, and that's what's going on at TAM.
Thank you.
Okay, So I'll go next. Jacob kind of said it all. When I heard the news about Florida, I was kind of shocked. I have family down there, and luckily they don't live right where the shooting happened. After it happened, kind of in our U.S. history class, we were talking about the gun laws and everything, and I think all of the kids in the class want stricter gun laws, and we think that we should have that or do stricter background checks. Speaking of the Parkland shooting, our peer resource is continuing to look at laws, and specifically gun laws, next week because of the shooting. And we're still looking at the values behind it. And other news, the seniors did first aid training, so CPR, and we also learned how to put pressure on an opened wound. So in my group, we had a nurse and we did a demo where she had fake blood and she squished it into a fake wound. So we all had to put the blood out. That was really fun. We also learned how to use and make our own tourniquet. So if anything ever happens at school, we know what to do. San Andreas is collaborating with Marin Oaks, and we're going to have 2 events this month. We are having a basketball game against them, and we are going to participate in their college fair. Our comm class ends this week. It, for me, was really helpful. All of the seniors in that class applied for comm, and Troy made us do a little action plan, so we know what we're going to do after we graduate high school. We have it all planned out. For me, he kind of showed me what kind of classes to take because I want to go into nursing, so now I know all my pre-major classes to take at comm if I decide to go to comm. And so about the big news at San Andreas, we got word about our model school status, and we are a California model school now. Thank you. Also, big news, our math teacher, Chris French, his wife had a baby on Valentine's Day, baby girl Tessa, so that is big too. And yeah, that's what's going on at San Andreas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Because of the recent gun violence and the shootings at schools, some of the teachers at Tamalpais are going to be focusing the next few weeks of core on gun laws here and in other countries, and we're going to be writing a paper on our opinions and what we think America should do about it. This Thursday, Tamalpais is having an open house for independent study in CEC, and students are going to be doing a student panel about what they like about Tamalpais, and informal visitations and poetry recitations by students. Independent study, 5 of our students are participating in SOAR, Students Against Racism, Thursday and Friday at Drake. Next week, independent study will be scheduling next year's classes during advisory with the help of our core teachers and our counselor, Grace. Team and Pathways have completed their informational visits to classrooms, history classrooms, and English classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we move on to trustee reports, and Trustee Anderson lost her voice, so would you like to pass or have one of us read one of your reports for you?
I am going to speak very deeply, and this is not how I usually sound. I toured Huckleberry Youth Programs, fabulous. I went to lots of basketball games. I saw our principal at TAM, Principal Farr, speak at the Redwoods, which was enlightening. I went to a Heart of Larkspur event. And Golden Bell is May 24th. See, this is very short. I hardly have any adjectives in here. The Fiscal Advisory and LCAP Committee met, maybe, Michael, you could talk about this, and then I don't have to. I just want to say I'm very grateful for that group. They are taking on an enormous task, helping us define where we might be able to cut costs. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So two things. I guess I was at two of the same events that you were. So the Heart of Larkspur was a community event in Larkspur put on by the Larkspur Community Foundation to thank members of the community and specifically community volunteers. And so Laura and I were both fortunate enough to be invited. It was a very, very good event. A lot of community spirit and constructive ideas. And then Laura and I were at the LCAP, which stands for Local Control Accountability Plan, Fiscal Advisory Committee, and that was a meeting that we had here, which followed shortly after our board workshop concerning the budget. And that's a committee that is composed of representatives from our unions, from administration, from the board, and parents from all of our schools, as well as other sort of stakeholders in the community. And the idea there was is to get their input in light of the budgetary situation that we face, which is that we have a structural deficit arising out of enrollment growth, and the costs so largely, but not entirely, enrollment growth. And the question, and the idea behind the committee was to get from these stakeholders some input in terms of helping us to prioritize sort of what are our values as a district, so that when we make some of the difficult decisions, in order to be able to be prudent from a budgetary standpoint, we're taking into account community input, and we have those values at the forefront. I want to thank David and Leslie in particular for all the hard work that went into making that a successful meeting. Okay.
At this point, given all the issues that are in front of us, this may seem almost trivial, but there is a bigger picture here, and our responsibility is to advocate for more revenue. And CSBA is doing a couple of things to do that. One, they're asking us to do a resolution for full and fair funding. Now, we can say that because we are community funded, it doesn't pertain to us, but we do get some funds from the state, and clearly we know it's not enough. We're 46th in the country in terms of pupil spending. And I'd also like to add, although none of us will be attending, I understand this, CSBA is promoting an advocacy training for trustees in the Sonoma, Marin, and Solano County area next Monday evening. I really couldn't drum up a lot of business for that. I'm trying to hope that we can get CSBA to offer an event here in Marin County. Traveling that far is just not these days possible. At any rate, thank you.
Thank you. I only had one additional item to add, is that I returned to 10,000 Degrees again, and this time met with 3 fellows, and it was really enlightening. And Tara, I was so impressed with how much they integrate with the existing programs and how well you've coordinated that. I'm finding it very interesting, and all the work they're doing in Marin City. I really enjoyed it. It was very uplifting, and very, very impressed. And of course, one of them, I think everyone in this county's had Barbara Owens as a teacher, it feels like, whenever I'm out. But one of them had her as a teacher, and so I got to hear about that. So I'll hand it to Chuck, and then we'll get the superintendent report.
I have very little to report. I went to JLAC in Barbara's place while she was in Italy, but I'll leave that to David to report. And other than that, not much. I went day hiking with team again. It's a tough job. Someone's got to do it. I think what's remarkable is that you have 2 retired teachers showing up for all of those, John Liu and myself. So TAM teachers just keep coming back. John comes over from the East Bay. So, David?
Okay, and before I read my report, just a reminder to President, we need to do number 8 and 9, so we don't want to forget that.
Thank you.
With regards to the communication, I want to follow the board president's sort of this heavy message with regards to the recent events that taken place. So on February 14th, as you know, the nation witnessed another mass shooting, killing 17 innocent people. Horrific as this was, I was reminded of the 58 deaths in Las Vegas on October 1st, 3 in San Francisco on June 14th, 5 in Orange County, Florida on June 5th, 5 in Fort Lauderdale on January 6th, 5 in Burlington, Washington on September 23rd, 49 in an Orlando nightclub back on June 12th of 2016, and then 14 in San Bernardino on December 12th. That was just in the span of 2 years. With each of these tragedies, many questions are raised on topics that are deeply personal and at the same time highly political. On occasion, I will get communications from parents regarding the safety of our campuses and demanding that we do more. While I and our principals assure our parents that we take multiple measures to ensure student safety, working closely with law enforcement, our partners at the county office, and the local resources of our excellent counselors and wellness staff, there seems to be a demand for more, as if building walls, gates, or the installation of metal detectors will create a greater sense of safety. Granted that there are no easy answers in situations like this. We are having conversations, as you heard, at the local, state, and national level around this topic. I do want to share that I think our campuses are extremely safe. This is based on a great relationship that our students have with the adults around them. More cameras will not compensate for the eyes and ears of those closest to the ground. We know that our students and staff care enough about the well-being of all that suspicious or concerning behavior is quickly reported. We rely on those with the knowledge on warning signs to assess the credibility of each and every threat, treating each one seriously and with the utmost of precautions, or recognizing the important function and duty we have to educate our students every day. We are always refining our methods and will continue to stay current on the best methods to keep our schools safe for the nearly 5,000 students that come to us each and every day. I, along with other superintendents, will be attending several workshops coming up at the county office, including active shooter training, as well as how to support student voice in light of what has recently happened. So I thank you for listening to that, again, heavy message.
No, thank you, Dr. Yoshihara. Very well said. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next meeting will be on March 13th, as a reminder. And I'll quickly get into the communications then. In board communications tonight, you should have an email from President Lengren dated February 15th regarding questions from Mr. Dempsey, reporter with the Arc newspaper. Email from Mary Jane Burke, County Superintendent of Schools, dated February 17th regarding the announcement of San Andreas, as you heard, as a model continuation school. Email from President Lundgren dated February 7th regarding questions from the TAM News. News release from the California Department of Education dated February 12th regarding the announcement of the model continuation schools. There should also be a parcel tax summary from the Marin County Office of Education dated November 28th, 2017. And then 2 presentations from the last board meeting, the first one from Godby Research and the other one from Whitehurst Mosher should be included in the communications. That includes my report.
Thank you. So it sounds as though I somehow missed item 8 and 9. I thought for sure I did it. I apologize. I didn't. Thank you. Good, we have more than one person help me out here. So I need to ask if we have any public comment on the consent agenda. Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, or do any trustees like to have any items removed for trustee consideration?
I think we need to remove 17J because we didn't talk about the grad waiver in closed.
Thank you. We will remove item 17J. Do any other trustees request any other item to be removed? Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of 17A? J, thank you.
Okay. I move we approve the consent agenda with the exception of 17J.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So that passed. Thank you. I think next is public comment on items not on the agenda, but I want to make sure since I managed to miss one before. Okay, good, thank you. So this is a time that we open up the podium for any member that would like to make a public comment. So this is only for items not on the agenda. So anything that is not having to do with the parcel tax, you're welcome to come to the podium. We do have a text that I would like to read. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and provides this time for members of the audience to address the board on any school-related matter not on this agenda. The board can take no action at this time. Each speaker is requested to identify themselves prior to addressing the board and will be heard up to 3 minutes. The presiding officer of the board shall determine, based on time constraints of the board, whether some time less than 3 minutes shall be allocated to individual speakers. So I do have 3 slips. You're not required to fill these out, but we do appreciate it when you do. It helps with, the correct spelling in the meeting summary. Would you like me to read your name, or if you'd like just to come up and get in line, that works as well too. Okay.
Leslie, do we have a timer? Oh,
Yes, we
Tara,
do.
yes, changed.
I'm close.
Hi, thank you.
I'm under Becky Kittredge.
Can you, one moment? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Becky Kittredge, and this is my 18th year teaching math at Redwood. And I'm speaking tonight in support of having sexual harassment training for our students, in both student-to-student and student-to-teacher harassment. I want to acknowledge first the 2 women who have spoken and shared their experiences at each of the last 2 board meetings. I have heard some talk that 2 teachers does not constitute a problem, but I think that the size of the problem has been masked by spotty reporting. One teacher may tell a friend, and one tells an admin, and non-tenured teachers are kind of actively dissuaded from reporting, and I think a lot of teachers just don't know what kind of comments they ought to report. Centralized reporting to Tara, will help with this, but it really won't make any bit of difference if the district and the teachers have no recourse because the students haven't been told the rules. We can take some sort of odd comfort, I suppose, in knowing that this problem is not unique to us. It's happening in my daughter's 5th grade class, it's happening here, and in all likelihood there will be some scandal on the news tonight. But this doesn't excuse us from not trying to do something about it here. Clearly adults are struggling with this issue, and we can't expect our students, our kids, to just learn this on their own. We need to give them the tools to deal with it. We need to tell them our expectations, and we need to hold them accountable. We all know we teach a lot more than curriculum. Our school is a really large part of the village that is raising these kids and helping them learn how to function in our society. It's our responsibility as part of that village to attempt to straighten and clarify the lines between acceptable and unacceptable behavior that have been so thoroughly blurred by what they see on TV and in the news. I understand this issue is messy. I understand kids are learning what is flirting, what is locker room talk, what is consent, and they're doing that on top of their schoolwork. We all know teenagers well, and we know that they need explicit instructions, and they usually need those instructions repeated and maybe explained in more than one way. We know they need to practice, and we know they will make mistakes. We owe it to our girls and we owe it to our boys both to be really clear about 3 things. They need to know what comments or actions constitute harassment. They need to know how to report it, and they need to know what the consequences will be for all involved. That's it. They need to know what it is, what to do if you see it or if it happens to you, and what will happen next. This can't possibly be more than we can handle. There are programs for this, and it's something we can do. We just need the board to direct it and the principals to set aside time for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Amai Papito. I have been a teacher for 15 years. I taught at Redwood in 2015-16. In every district, I have been harassed, sexually harassed, and bullied by students. At Redwood, students left sexually explicit drawings on furniture and boards anonymously. Others felt bold enough to turn these lewd illustrations into me on homework or tests with their name on it. While teaching, I have even had a student hold up a large-scale image of an erect penis behind me, which derailed the lesson. This is in addition to inappropriate comments and jokes that not only made me uncomfortable, but made students uncomfortable too. These incidents, like others that I don't have time to elaborate on, were not acted on when I reported them. Other times, I didn't feel confident based on past experience with administrative support to even attempt to report them. Over and over again, I felt that administration weighed my word against the students in terms of general harassment by students, and every time sides with the student. This sends a repeated message to students that no matter what they say or do, the students are right, and it's okay that it continues. It seemed that administration was more concerned with handling the students with kid gloves or avoiding litigation than teaching them when they have acted inappropriately and giving any consequences that prohibit the behavior from continuing. By not acting, the administration created a culture of intimidation, bullying, and harassment. For me, enough is enough, and I have left the profession. The schools are enablers of systemic abuse. By not providing the necessary support for a teacher who is targeted by abuse, the schools mark the teacher as an easy victim with an open invitation to all students to target the same teacher again.
Thank you.
Am I allowed to talk without a yellow page?
Yes, you are. Absolutely.
See, I am. All right. I'm Jessica Crabtree. I've been teaching in the TAM district on my 21st year. And so I wasn't planning to talk tonight, but in listening to what's been said, I just wanted to voice the idea that in taking the pyramid and turning it upside down, yes, we're here for the students, but the idea that that doesn't mean that everything that they have to say or perceive is exactly the way it is. So in my 21 years, just in recent years, in the last 6 years, 8 years, the message has been students first means students always right. And so I think student first means a little bit different than that. It means that we educate them and we help them, and as teenagers, they see the world in a very narrow view, and we help them to open it up and see it in a much wider view, to see the same situation with multiple perspectives. The other thing on the comment about making sure that comments are solution-based and not disruptive, I would have to say that what I did on January 23rd and what Eva Reeder did on February 6th, that was necessary because we had, as individuals and other women, had been repeatedly speaking to our admin. We had been reaching out to the district for more than a year, and even you had received letters. And so the idea that nothing was changing and nothing was being done necessitated coming and doing a talk. That was necessary because now actually there is some change that is in the horizon. The next thing in terms of the status of the investigation, I hope that there's some oversight. I know that I was that I was, what is the word? They reached out to me to talk to me, and I had some questions. And what I learned is, since the time that you had hired an investigator, I was the only person that they're going to talk to. I gave other names, and I said, well, why don't we talk to these people first? And so I think that's really concerning that, and it turned out that there was a list of other names, but I think it's very concerning that I would be the only one. Like, that just feels off, like in a 2-week time that I'm the only woman reached out to. And then I also asked about, what's the central focus? And the central focus is not the district, it's Redwood only. I was told, I documented the conversation, that the investigation is only about Redwood. So I think it's a bigger picture, and I want the solution to be bigger than that. I want the solution to not just be about me, and I want some sort of oversight to make sure that it does go wider than that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm William Crabtree. I'm a teacher at Redwood, and this is my 22nd year at Redwood. Ms. Lundgren, I appreciate your comments, but I'm sorry, but I don't have a lot of confidence in the board, administration, and especially David Sondheim. I don't understand how that can be repaired for me. My family has already experienced an investigation where my wife certainly learned the difference between what is illegal and what is unethical in terms of workplace treatment by your employer. So pardon me for not necessarily buying into the bridge building idea. I don't have very much confidence in the investigation because I think the scope is narrow. I don't think that there will be any transparency because I don't believe that you will actually release any results to it because of privacy concerns or anything like that. So as far as taking responsibility for it, which I've never heard any principal or any admin at any school actually take any responsibility for any kind of misstep, I don't have confidence that the school district will take responsibility for the results of this investigation. So I believe this is kind of a matter of trust. And I don't see how any employee that is in this situation where they've been harassed, they've been demeaned, they've been disrespected, and nothing done about it, can trust any of you anymore. So it just, to me, seems like, as my wife said, you already know about all these incidents, and you haven't done anything about it. In fact, as one incident characterized as, maybe we have a blind spot somewhere. Okay, well, you got a big blind spot. Another comment that was made in the press was, I believe, truly shameful. And the comment underscores the boys will be boys mentality at play here. It belittles the impact that harassment has on every aspect of a victim's life. The second-guessing, the fear, the realization that their noble profession has been kind of tainted by ideological bullies that are in a position of authority. And that's what we have at play here. And Dr. Yoshihara, I believe that you need to apologize for the knucklehead behavior comment that was made in the press to every employee within this school district. It's not right. It belittles the experience that they have. And lastly, the common denominator here is David Sondheim. He continues to not take responsibility for any of this. If the board is truly serious about the investigation, then Mr. Sondheim should be removed from his position pending the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional public comment? Again, this is for items not on the agenda. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which reads, report on goals, teaching and learning, equity, access, and student wellness.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight I am going to share a little bit of what I've been asked to share around what our schools do currently to prepare for a tragedy or a crisis. And I want to start by saying that each principal sent out a communication to their community at the end of the February 14th week with regards to some basic information. So what I want to start with is that each site has a safety plan, and that is printed, in some places displayed, and that's one thing we're going to make sure we go around and make sure that the safety plan is displayed publicly throughout all of the buildings. And generally speaking, in that safety plan, there are three main safety plans that are within that. And the first is a shelter-in-place protocol that we have, which occurs if there's a dangerous situation requiring students and staff to secure themselves in a building until a situation is normalized. The second one is an evacuation, and that occurs when it's necessary to vacate buildings due to fire or other indoor hazards. These are most commonly known as fire drills, and that's usually we evacuate to a place within the campus, but away from the buildings, usually a sports field or something. And then the third is a campus lockdown, and that occurs if there's an immediate danger to students and staff, and it's essential to secure the site quickly. So we have protocols in place for all of those. It is a fluid, response to crisis. We learn something every time there is a crisis, and then they update policies and practices. So these are fluid. And because of that, as a district, we do participate with regular meetings with the law enforcement partnership up at the county office, and that's where the law enforcement fills us in on new updates and policies and practices. We also, MCOE offers what they call active shooter trainings multiple times a year. And every time we have an incident, like a threat, where we partner with the police, we also do sort of a debrief with the police afterwards and discuss what went well, what didn't go well. We focus more on what didn't go well, and try to adjust our practices and protocols based on the experiences we have from those instances. So right now, each of these drills is supposed to be conducted at least once each semester at each site, and they're supposed to happen both announced and unannounced so that practice can happen. One thing we know is that the best possible response comes when your staff and students have had time to practice for these types of things, which is really unfortunate. And we're also very mindful that even drills now can be very triggering for people and very upsetting. So these are things that we are working very closely with our counselors and our wellness centers and just trying to make sure that we are being thoughtful, doing what is necessary to make sure we're prepared.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions, or do any of the student trustees have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does anybody who's been around here longer than I have know whether the board has ever taken a position on gun control? Right? I mean, typically, right, we try to stay within the scope of what's of our of our fiduciary duties, right? Sort of the scope of our jobs here. But increasingly, these issues are impinging upon the scope of our jobs. And I'm wondering whether folks who've been around here longer than I have know whether the issue has it been taken up, and would it be appropriate to address, to address the issue?
I think, I don't know the answer to that. I think there's also maybe two parts to that. There's gun control is a larger issue, and then having armed people on our campuses as a second issue. And we have a policy that says no guns on campus, which I think speaks to the idea of, do we actually want to arm people on our campuses? And so I see those as two separate things, so I'm not sure if you were speaking on a more global gun control Second Amendment issue or on a more specific how do we feel about arming staff?
Well, I'm thinking about tying it to the schools, obviously, that's why we're here. If the discussion has already been had, right, at the board level in the past, I mean, I want to learn from that as well. So I would be curious as to whether, Corey, you remember any kind of discussion like that, or Chuck or Barbara or anybody else who might be, or Walt?
I'm not aware, but when I was teaching, like most teachers, I was pretty oblivious to what goes on at the board level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
I do recall conversations around this when we were talking about increasing and further defining the role of a resource officer. I cannot remember what incident that was tied to, but I remember being a part of the conversation that led to an increase in a much clearer definition of what a resource officer's role would be in this.
Right.
So, and I'm sure there's minutes to back that up that I could probably find for you.
Okay.
Does that answer your
I'd like to at least make a comment about the second part of arming people on campus. I've had close quarter combat training. It's very hard. And the professionals that do it, the military, the police, train again and again and again and again. And they don't get it right. And there's a big difference between doing a close quarter combat training and actually being in a combat situation. What was the medical term? I can't remember. There's a medical term, but basically shit in your pants. And it happened all the time in Vietnam. All the time. I have a friend who flew on airplanes in World War II, bombing missions. It happened all the time. They are so scared. Reloading a weapon, you're trembling so much you can't do it. I think teachers who've been in the classroom dealing with an obstreperous student are trembling when they write the note, to send the kid out of the classroom. It is a ridiculous idea. And then the point of, okay, a teacher does have a gun, which they shouldn't. Where do they put it? Anyone who has dealt with 12, 13-year-old boys knows that you can't have a loaded gun around, because sooner or later, and probably sooner than later, one of them is going to pick it up and accidentally shoot it off. So you have to have the gun in one place, you have to have the ammunition in another place, they both have to be under lock and key, and then someone shows up with an AR-15. What are you going to do? Your first responsibility is to secure the room, protect your students. This is just craziness. It's just craziness.
Agreed.
I think we should think about it as a board about whether we would put it on our agenda. I mean, we're asking, right, we heard Jacob talk about it, right, we have the students, at TAM laudably demonstrating the fact that they're so upset that it happened, and they're obviously the opposition to the violence, and we're the elected officials here. We have plenty of people in the community who, we have moms demand action. I mean, we just have plenty of people in the community for whom this is an important issue. We've had repeated threats of, kinds of violence. I mean, this is an issue that we should think really strongly about taking up and deciding sort of what our role is in this. And ultimately, if we decide to limit it to the policy that Tara and Chuck have been discussing, then that's okay. Maybe just simply even reiterating that policy if that's where we want to go, and if we want to go further than that. But I mean, I just think I'm tired of thoughts and prayers. It's just absurd. It's just not enough. It's meaningless at this point.
I have a wonder. I saw that Mary Jane Burke had a piece in the IJ about gun control. And I'm wondering if instead of perhaps, or in addition to, maybe having this conversation at the county level, like where the county stands on this issue, might be something worth pursuing too. Because we're not the only district that has this on our plates.
I really like Michael's idea as well of maybe we could have consensus now that we want to have this as an agenda item, and between now and then, Dr. Yoshihara could coordinate with the county office.
Like that.
But can we get consensus that we want this on the agenda?
Yes.
I think we can. Okay.
I have another question. This is a selfish question. Given the craziness that we've seen, do you think it's a good idea for this pile of people up here to have a plan in case we have someone who comes to one of our meetings and is upset with us?
It's always a good idea to have a plan.
Because I'm not aware of our plan right now, if we have one.
Fortunately, we never have anybody who's upset with us, so it's...
Yeah.
There was training provided to some of us,
Emergency, crisis response.
and the two consultants who provided that seemed to indicate that there would be more opportunities for us to
Right.
get more explicit training. And I think it is appropriate for us here.
And our students, anyone who's up here,
Yes.
I think it would be worth someone just giving us a little bit of information. Thank you.
I think there's another, when we take this up, this is, I believe, a former Obama Surgeon General brings this up rightly that many people, I'm sure, have heard. This is epidemic. This is a health issue as well. So I think
Yeah.
framing it in that light will also, I think, help us.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Tara. So now we'll go to our main agenda topic tonight, which is we're going to discuss and take action on parcel tax measure. So Dr. Yoshihara and I believe Whitehurst Mosier.
Bear with me a second. Mary's loading up the PowerPoint. We didn't see.
Okay.
Oh, see, Jill's here. Thank you. We're gonna, so as I'll have Jill come up and carry on just saying, so at the last board meeting, as the board recalls, we spent considerable time both with Godby Research as well as with our strategist, Whitehurst Mosher, going over the polling results, and then also briefly with regards to some decisions that were sort of waiting for the board to decide upon, particularly as it relates to timing, sizing, and maybe to a lesser extent, escalation factors and things like that. This was all part of the robust discussion last time. I felt the board really dug into this. They spent considerable time asking a great host of questions, and we did promise to come back here today to continue the conversation. We've also reached out, and I know the board may want to add, also reached out to a number of folks. We sent out wide messages to our community, our parents and other groups, specifically letting them know that this is ongoing and happening with our board, and to please come and share their thoughts with regards to, again, some big decisions that the board will have to weigh. So that really brings us to where we are tonight. I will then turn it over to Jill to do a little bit of presentation and then open that up for discussion and public comment as well. So thank you. Thank you, Jill.
Good evening, everyone. Most of what I'm hoping to do here, just to continue what David had just talked about, is sort of, I know there was a lot of information that came at you last week, so I'm just going to sort of recap the work that we've been doing outside of the board meetings, review some of the poll results, talk a little bit about what would need to happen to be successful on the ballot, and then, open it up for discussion or questions. And as David said, I know some of the board members have been reaching out to community members, so we'll want to update on that. So just as a quick update, we've done a lot of work since we started in October, including the financial analysis, electoral analysis. We did stakeholder outreach, and over the past few weeks, we've been engaging in the community in the discussion. So As David said, we sent out emails through the schools network. We also reached out to community organizations and asked them to send out email information and through social media to make sure that as many members of the Tamalpais Union School District community were aware of the situation and invite them to either engage online. I think we had about 20 or so people submit comments through the website, and then to come to the meeting tonight. If the board should decide to move ahead with a revenue measure for June, you would need to approve we would need to come back with the measure for approval at the next meeting. So March 9th is the deadline to submit to the Board of Elections for the June election, and then August 10th is the deadline for the November election. So just to help frame our conversation. So the next steps are for the board to decide whether or not it wants to move ahead with a revenue measure, and if so, what election date? That would be the first question. How much? We tested in the polling, and what we've been talking about through, since the board, at the board's direction, is a 50% increase or a 100% increase, the length, and then the escalator. We are hopeful that at this meeting, the board will be able to come to consensus and direct us to work with staff to draft that measure and bring it back to a review at a March meeting. Obviously, we have a little bit more time if it's November over June, but that is my goal, is that we would be able to develop something for you to approve in March. You would then vote to submit that to the Department of Elections in March, and we would work with staff to prepare basically a public education plan to let the community know that this measure would be on an upcoming ballot. I wanted to quickly review, this came up on our last committee meeting, sort of once you put it on the ballot, what needs to happen in order for the measure to be successful, because unfortunately, that's not quite enough. So some of the things are in advance of putting something on the ballot, and we've gone over these things before, but we want to create a revenue plan that's good public policy. The board has spent a long time thinking about that, and what additional revenue at different levels would mean for the school community. We want to create a ballot measure that voters will support. Obviously, that is something we've learned through the polling and through the public engagement and stakeholder engagement. And I have a couple slides in here on polling, but we can talk about that. Maximizing our support by picking the right election date is a key. It's key. And I know we spent some time talking about that last board meeting, and I'm sure we will talk about it more now. Some of the things we haven't talked about is once you place it on the ballot, we're going to need as much support in the community as possible. That means, community groups, opinion leaders, a vast majority. Obviously, we're not going to, the dream is to get unanimous consensus to support the measure, but we really need, to get to 2/3 is a big lift in any community, and in order to do it, you need to do the work of getting community organizations, business organizations, parent groups on board. Not only that, but point 5 is engaging with people who we think, and the board has been doing this, people who we think could be opposed to the measure, and working with them to create a measure that they might support or at least stay neutral on, which again is something the board has been working on. The 6 and 7 things I think are the biggest considerations as you look towards a June or November decision. In order to get to 2/3, you are going to need 2 major things. One is a really engaged core group of supporters, largely I think parents and teachers and everybody to work together to serve as sort of a campaign committee to communicate to the public that this measure is on the ballot and why it benefits the community. That takes a significant amount of time to get up and running. In some local communities, we've seen campaign committees range from 50 to 100 volunteers who help with fundraising and door-to-door outreach, and it can be a big operation, especially in a district this size. And the other important factor is that the community, obviously outside the board, the community can raise enough money to communicate the need to the voters at large. Unfortunately, that's a reality of politics, and we're seeing, even in the feeder schools in this district, we're seeing, I think Mill Valley over the last 5 elections spent over $100,000 in each campaign cycle. So, and they're a fraction of the size. I'm sure Kentfield's current election will get close to that as far as expenditure. So just giving the community the time that it will need to raise money to wage a full campaign. I included these slides. I don't know if it's helpful just to review where we were at. So we tested the 50% increase and the 100% increase. I think in this one I just included the 428. So that was the 50% increase. Again, we start at basically 70% on both. A little bit more solid numbers for November, but not a huge difference on the initial question. We then grow, right? So once we gave positives, all of our positive arguments and all the positive aspects of the measure, for June, we grow to 74%. For November, we grew to 75.7%. And then after negatives, we landed on the June at 70.9% and the November at 73%. So that was in large part one of the numbers that compelled both Godby Research and our firm to recommend the November 50% increase. And then I fixed this from last time, but just to go over it again, I can go, is it helpful if I go over this again, or have we done this already? Just, you know, it is our opinion that there are a lot of factors to consider June versus November, but that a November ballot is a better option for the district given the large number of factors, both public support and then other things that are going to be on the ballot and what turnout looks like. Which leaves us with, and I think this is not new information, but based on the polling and the stakeholder engagement, our recommendation is that the board proceed with a renewal and increase of 50% for the November 2018 election with for a length of 15 years and with a cost of living adjustment. As you remember, the question that Brian tested in the polling just said cost of living. So our recommendation is the measure, there's one other measure in Marin County, Mill Valley's last, not the measure that just passed, but the one before that, is a cost of living adjustment tied to CPI not to exceed 3%. So that seems to be a good example and our recommendation for what to include in this situation. So happy to discuss or take questions. I don't know if anybody else wants to provide updates.
Jill, can you back up to the last, keep going back, stop there, the informed support. What is the statistical deviation?
My recollection is it's plus or minus 4%.
Okay.
But I'm not a statistician, so I can go back and double check that again. It was at least plus or minus 4%.
So that makes the June final test at 70.9 minus 4% a squeaker.
Correct.
Do you by chance have information, I know it's not in the slide, but it just occurred to me this moment that we might have, or do we have any trustees that wanted to consider 100% rather than 50?
I did. I know that. I did. And that's just counter to everything that I've been thinking about and talking about, because we've got such a tremendous gap. Our needs. Yes, we have more students, but we have programs to maintain. We have teachers and staff to support to be here. Our needs are so great that I'm more convinced that I want to have at least get your thoughts about 100%. I can see that it's counterintuitive. I know that people are up against, we all are, up against taxes, but this really is an issue of investing in our children for the next 10 years. So I'd kind of like to hear why that's not a good idea from you.
I've thought about this too, Barbara, and I mean, we saw the polling results that indicated that 100% does not get us to a comfortable place in terms of the 600 people that were surveyed. And I am just, this trustee is not comfortable going out for a full 100%. We do have a gap that we need to figure out how to solve. But I feel like the conversations that we are having about how to be more efficient as a district will help us bridge that gap. And do what we need to do with our, compensate our teachers properly and provide the kind of learning environment that we want for our kids. I think 100% is just, it's too big an ask. And the survey results back that up. And it would also mean if we went for a full 100%, instead of 13% of our revenue source coming from parcel taxes, it would be 26% or thereabouts, which feels like putting too many eggs in one basket to me.
I have a couple of questions, but Chuck, if you had.
No, yeah, I just don't see us getting the 100%. I just don't see it happening with the voters. And, Barbara, you drive north to get here. I drive south through Kentfield, and for every yes on A sign, someone has stuck a no on A sign. With electronic communication, the internet, social network, there's really now a platform that has never existed before for people who oppose these things. It was easier 10 years ago to pass a parcel tax because opposition couldn't organize. Now opposition does organize. And I think, just looking at all the, these are signs, someone has gone out and spent, hundreds, if not, thousands of dollars to put, no on A signs up. And I think if we go for 100%, we're probably going to see that too. And when you're playing around at the 60, in the 65 to 70% range, there's just not that much wiggle room. Who knows? Maybe we'll get 75%, but I wouldn't count on it.
Michael?
It worries me. Going for I would sure like the 100%. It would solve most of our issues with money. But a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. And even we don't have a bird in the hand. A bird in arm's reach is worth two in the bush.
So we have, board communications, which is part of the public agenda, includes the Godby report that we had at the last meeting. And so for the margin of error, Jill has a good memory, but the margin of error for the June voters was plus or minus 4.31%, and the margin of error for likely November voters is 3.73%. So certainly hovering around that 4% figure. So I have a couple of questions before I address what your issue that you raised, Barbara. When you say 15 years, so our current parcel tax expires in 2022. So the idea would be to add 10 years on that, or is it, or is it, I just want to know what you mean by 15 years.
So what we tested was a renewal of your existing measure with an increase. So it would be 15 years starting from the passage of the measure.
Okay.
So there would no longer be a 2022 expiration date.
Okay. So it would expire 15, so it would be whatever, if we do it in 2037. Well, no, because that would add on to.
18 plus 15 is, we can do that. Yeah.
It's from now.
2037.
Okay.
Yeah,
33.
33,
Yeah.
right. So it's roughly the same. It's if we're adding, okay, got it. I just need to make sure I understood. So it was not clear to me, this may have been communicated to you after the meeting, that what you apparently were talking about with respect to the inflator, the 3% annual increase, that you were tying it to the CPI. That was not clear to me at the last meeting at all. And I'm curious, and I have I have a couple of, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but I have a couple of reservations about it. Number one is I think it makes it a little more difficult to plan because we don't necessarily know what the CPI, Consumer Price Index, is going to reflect in any given year. And it would be interesting to know, if we looked at historically, sort of what that CPI measure has been over the last 25 years, so we get a sense. And also kind of what CPI index we're picking, right? There's statistics and damn lies, et cetera, and I'd be curious to know what index we would pick. And I I also don't think in general, I think as a matter of public policy, I think sometimes tying revenue measures or benefits to CPI, you're just kind of baking in this idea of inflation. And I know that it is, maybe we're baking it in anyway, sort of at 3%. But I guess I'm curious as to why you think that would be better from a strategic perspective, and whether there are any other districts that have gone out with these inflators other than the one that you've identified, a couple times ago for Mill Valley, where that's what they've opted for.
I mean, I think a couple things. One is, and I guess I would ask you a question back. Is it CPI versus no escalator, or CPI versus a?
No, I think we need to recognize that over time we need to have an escalator. And I think that I forget which district went out for a 5% escalator. Was that Kentfield as part of their losing proposition?
I believe Mill Valley's last measure was a 5% escalator.
Yeah.
The one before that was the annual inflation set by CPI. And Kentfield's current measure has a 5% escalator, but I actually don't know what's in the current proposal.
Yeah. I think, my opinion, 5% is it's a lot.
I mean,
Yeah,
Mill Valley won that election by 24 votes.
Yeah, I think 5% is too aggressive. But I think there needs to be an escalator, because I think as a practical matter over time, our costs are gonna go up. I mean, that's
Correct,
just the way
right.
it is, right? We want to pay our, teachers and other staff. We have all these pension obligations. I mean, we want to programs and so forth. So I mean, I think we do have an escalator. It's just not clear to me why we would tie it to the CPI as opposed to saying 3%. And this is what we think is being sort of fair to the community, recognizing that over the span of this, our costs are going to go up.
To be clear, I mean, I think 3% would be fine. I think the idea that, I think people are really playing with this concept, and escalators have become more of an issue in a campaign or in a ballot measure. So I think when Mill Valley tried it, and I've seen other school districts do similar things, the idea is to be sort of more responsive to the community, to say, look, as costs go up as set by CPI, we will stick to that, right? It's like so when times are good, it will increase more than when it's not. I think it's an attempt to be responsive. I don't think it's critical.
Okay.
If the board decides to do a 3% or 2%, I mean, I actually defer a little bit to Laura, because I think she's been having some conversations with community members about this. But the bigger issue, I think, is because it doesn't pop as an issue in the polling. We tested multiple options. The question is really, is there vocal opposition based on the escalator that we should take into consideration?
Okay.
When I went out and talked to parent leaders at Redwood and Drake, we didn't necessarily talk about the escalator, but I had some of the same questions that Michael has expressed about the cost of living increase built into our ballot measure. And I did look back, and I believe I found that Mill Valley has 2 parcel taxes, and the one that's tied to the CPI, not to exceed 3%, which is what we are considering tonight. In 15-16, the cost of living adjustment was 2.4%. So it was below the 3%, and there was no more history that I could find before that. I'm sure it's there. Because I think it's unusual. If you look at the data that was included in board communications, all of our other feeder districts have parcel taxes with a set escalator, not tied to a cost of living increase. And it would make for more consistent planning. We would know what's coming in. Yeah.
No,
I
agree.
and I'm not sure the CPI it's not clear to me. It may be, I'm not saying that it isn't, but we don't have enough information in front of us to know whether CPI is really an accurate measure of, what year to year, cost increases are like in our district. In other words, even, I understand we'd be pegging it to something that would argue, some kind of objective measure, but it's not clear that that's an accurate reflection of what we deal with here. It may be, but anyway, I was you know, I didn't hear that the last time. I'm hearing it now. So I just want to think that we ought to consider it. So Barbara, you raised the question of 100%. I know you want me to. So I thought I pushed Jill and Godby pretty hard at the last meeting about the question of not 100%, because I think that the results tend to indicate that taking into account we don't see it up here now, but taking into account the margin for error, you know, we could be going, if we're too aggressive, we could be left with nothing. So I think the question, certainly as I expressed it, was, is there a number, you know, between 50% and 100% that, assuming that it makes sense from a revenue and expense perspective, right? Whether that would be something that we should be a little bit more aggressive than 50%. Mr. Godby was not enthusiastic about it. Jill was actively, I would say, advising us against it. And, you know, you're welcome to say what your rationale is. You know, again, we have a larger, you know, group here. So I'm willing to be, you know, we hire these folks, right? I'm not the expert. You know, we hire these folks who are experts. I don't want to come away with nothing. But it's also kind of tied into the idea, and this was sort of my other question. I'm going to give you a moment before you have to maybe address that again, which is I want to know, again, David, sort of how much revenue we're talking about with these, you know, with this parcel tax, right? Because we've had all these discussions now about $6 million annual structural deficit, and so, you know, how much is this going to bring in? How much additional, right, revenue will this, if we do the recommended 50% increase plus a 3% inflator, you know, what are we talking about in terms of our budget?
Thank you. As a refresher with regards to the fiscal situation that was shared with the board prior, the current parcel tax brings in northwards of 10 million, but less than 11 million. And, you know, it is going up because of the escalator that's built in there. So what was shared is a 50% roughly increase on that would bring in somewhere between 5 and 6 million additionally per year. With a structural deficit right now north of 6 million for both the current and subsequent year, the 50% increase in the parcel tax would help a lot in closing that, but not close it completely. And I think it was also reminded the board that that's just with current assumptions. So certainly the big one is we have not settled with any bargaining units. So less that is still a northwards of $6 million, 6.2, 6.3 million structural deficit. So that is the frame for which we started this conversation in terms of sizing and where we left. If I can add a little bit, Michael, with regards to last time, I do remember they got down in sort of the psychometrics of the numbers, and that certain numbers triggered certain things for people. I remember Brian sharing that 149 could probably work over 143 because, again, the psychometrics of it is but once you cross the 150, something you begin to get a barrier. Then there were other barriers. 199 is another barrier, and so on and so forth. So those are the things that you begin to play with, and since they didn't test it, they couldn't guarantee the effect on the approval ratings on that. But he did say that those were psychological thresholds. I think we also discussed, I think to some fair extent, that the need to show some fiscal prudence through this process and to show that we are doing everything we can locally before we approach the voters. So those were things that I know were shared. And myself and fiscal working closely with the county office at the next meeting for Second Amendment, certainly more so in June. We now have Terry Ryland in the audience, who I'm glad she's here to listen to this conversation. We'll be acutely aware of where we'll need to make those reductions for recommendations as I solicit input from not only the administrative group, but also our staff groups, our parent groups, and then bringing this back to LCAP, the LCAP group, before making a recommendation in June. So I have the resolution for March just about done, and bless you. And so that sort of lays in the background that I think there'll be some expectation of what is the district doing to also reduce costs. So I think that's, for me, if anything, in terms of the 100% question, if it's 100%, then the public may wonder what are we locally doing on that. Not that we wouldn't do anything, but that question may be a bigger question otherwise.
So Barbara, do you feel like you need more information in terms of, so we're good there?
In a public setting, open to the...
Okay. You're not
sorry.
in the microphone.
I appreciate it because I think we had discussed it. I want to go to the edges
Okay.
so that everyone knows that we are considering everything with
No, it's good.
depth and seriousness. And given our gaps, it's not out of the question. But I hear.
Okay.
I
Do you,
hear the
do you need more information brought to you, or do you think you have what you need? And we've all talked about the CPI versus 3%. Maybe we'll keep that open. Did you want to share any feedback? I can share feedback I received from the community at TAM.
Yeah, and I also do want to talk about the term. I'm not totally comfortable with 15 years.
So I guess I'm trying to get a read.
When are we going to take public comment?
Well, that's what I want to get a read of. What more do we need to talk about before we go to the public, and then we'll come back here? You said term. I've heard the same feedback, probably, that the term's too long, and maybe we'll hear
I feel
from-
like the term is too long
Right.
before we go out and ask the public to reevaluate, and no other district in the Bay Area outside of those that have evergreen parcel taxes, which are ongoing, don't have an end, have a 15-year. 12 is
Right.
as long. So that's just, I wanted to make sure I got that out before my voice totally goes. And then if you wanted input on, our strategist, Jill, asked the 2 board members that have been working with Whitehurst Mosher to approach our parent leaders at our 3 comprehensive sites, just to get kind of a temperature on how our parent community felt about the prospect of going out for an increased parcel tax. Because if we don't have the parent support, we're dead in the water. And so I had the pleasure of reaching out to the Redwood Foundation president, who's sitting in the audience, and I'm hoping she will have a chance to speak. Karen Labaca, did I say your name correctly? No, I did not. Sorry. And her counterpart at Redwood, the PTSA president, Patty. I've been spending money at different coffee shops this week. And I also spoke with Pascal at the Drake Fund. She's at Drake, they don't have a foundation and a PTSA. They combine into one parent group. And after talking to those 3 women who were representing their parent constituent, but really, I mean, speaking for themselves, but just kind of giving me a sense for where they thought the parent community would stand on this parcel tax issue, I definitely felt like we have parent support from Redwood and Drake. I also heard that it will be imperative if we go forward with this to have a very simple, clear, concise message, and communication is going to be critical if we want this thing to pass. So great conversations, and boy, we have so much to be grateful for in this community. I think we all know that. We're a community-funded district, but to hear these parent leaders really underscore that support meant a lot. So I don't think that we should take that for granted, and we need to make sure that our parent community knows how much we feel that support and appreciate it. And you talked to Tam.
Yes, and I can report out on that, and I want to say one thing about the term before we open it up. So I spent time talking with Karen Meason, who's the PTA president at Tam High, and Ethan Mueller. Did I say your last name correctly? Good. I see a nod. And Ethan is the chairman of the foundation. Similar to what Trustee Anderson Laura was saying, both these individuals just took a little bit of a temperature, couldn't really speak on behalf officially of their organization, especially the foundation, since they're a 501c3. But Ethan was able to give me more of his direct feedback. But it did definitely get a sprinkling of information from multiple parent leaders. And what's a little unique about talking with Mill Valley is they did just go through the parcel tax, and it's a very, very dedicated group of parents, very supportive of education, and they just went through it. They're primed and still want to work with us to move forward as a community and support education and do what they can. I did get some feedback I want to share with the board from multiple sources. And again, I look at these as pretty valuable since they just went through this, is that we need to look at being much more transparent with our numbers. We forget we're here at board meetings, and sometimes what we talk about doesn't automatically make it to parent leaders, and we need to be very clear what our fiscal plan is and be consistent with our messages to the community so there's no confusion. And especially if you think about a foundation or a PTA, whoever it is that's trying to raise money, and they're going to their constituents to raise money, the first question is, well, how much does it cost? And we need to be able to share that. And I think what you've said that also, Jill, as we move forward, and we're looking not only at cuts, but we're looking at the current costs. We need to be able to know what actual programs cost. The more we can get out to the community, the better, and partner and network with the parents. These were consistently noted to me during conversations, and so I'm glad that you are looking at a community outreach plan. And I think after the parcel tax, we as a board will want to look at how we do that after the parcel tax. That it's not something you only do 6 months before you go out for a vote. So I really appreciated that very constructive feedback that I received, and I'm very, like you, I'm in awe and very grateful to this community for the amount of support that the students in the district gets. I did want to, and I don't see her here, but I did get some very interesting feedback on the 15-year, and the point being that while on one hand, yes, the polling results showed that, but if our main reason for doing this, the first reason, the enrollment growth, and we all know there's other reasons too, mainly the pension, but we don't have numbers past 10 years that have the reliability to necessarily warrant saying we're going to go out for 15. So I thought that was really good point of information if we're always trying to tie it to a reason, and I would suggest that the board consider that aspect in terms of the term. It's 7:40, and I see a lot of people, and I'd really love to hear, in case, I think we're getting a sense of where we're moving. I don't think anyone's going to, maybe you'll surprise me, maybe someone will still say they want 100%, but I think we're making progress, but it'd be really helpful to hear from the community. Do you agree?
Yeah, I was just thinking we haven't talked about the timing, June versus November, as a board. That might be good for everyone to hear before we open it up to public comment.
I think this one here,
Yeah.
I can tell by the body language.
Well, I'm concerned about, we need the revenue as soon as we can get it, and we'll be behind six months if we don't go out in June. My other thought was, I know, again, crazy perhaps, but is it possible that if we don't get a pass in June, is it possible to go out again in November with a reconstructed proposal or ballot measure? No.
No, I mean, I think
I'm asking.
Yeah, no, it's fair to ask, and it came up in our working group, and I don't think that there's enough time, and I think you will end up burning a lot of your community support and goodwill in the community by going twice, and
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Also, the funding,
Technically, yes.
It's
And-
technically
I haven't seen it done successfully, and
and raising the money, I think you were
Correct,
talking about.
right.
It's a huge push to raise money for the campaign, and you'd have to, yeah, I mean.
and it costs
June-
the district money to put it on each time, too.
Any other board comments on that issue before we open up to the public?
And a lot of that time between June and September is summer, when people are not around.
Okay.
To do the work.
Student trustees, do you have any thoughts now, or would you also rather wait until you hear more from the public?
I personally would rather hear more from the public. One thing I am worried about is if you do on 100%, that does seem risky, especially since the Mill Valley, which was very close, was passed in 2016, which was a presidential election year, and this is only a midterm election year, so it's probably going to have a lower voter turnout, which you probably know.
That's a good point. Very good. Okay, thank you for your patience. Really appreciate it. So any of you that would like to comment on this agenda item, I'll just ask that you step forward and introduce yourself, and we may ask you for spelling, but look forward to getting your feedback.
Hi, I'm Karen Lobica, and I'm president of the Redwood High School Foundation, and I have sophomore twins here at Redwood. So, I can't speak on behalf of our entire community, but I certainly have a good sense of a lot of support, 100% support from the people that I know and interact with. Here's a question. Between 50% and 100%, I think to Michael's point, there's a whole lot of room. There's a whole lot of room between that. And if we can find numbers to, maybe to Barbara's point, show what it is that we're trying to achieve in terms of closing the gap, does 65% make sense? To me, that seems a little more 100% is not palatable. And I could not agree more with the feeling that it just wouldn't pass. But could 65% or 62, whatever it is, that sounds, because 50% is, to me, just, it's like, it's 50 or it's 100. And it's random. But if there's some way to come up with a number that supports what you're going for in order to close the $6 million gap or the $5.73 million gap, maybe something like that would be good. I know that June is really hard, and it's really hard and fast to go after. I'm worried about November, and there's going to be a lot of noise in November, given our current political environment. Here's a question. I don't know if this is to you, Jill. I know we need a 2/3 vote. If people show up to vote for a candidate or another measure, but choose not to vote on this parcel tax, does that count for or against? So it's just a null. Okay.
It's 2/3 of votes cast on this.
Votes cast. Okay. Okay. So anyway, our community is strong. It's ready to go. I have no doubt whatsoever that we'll be able to get a fierce campaign and a bunch of people behind it. So count on us.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name's Ethan Muller. I'm a TAM parent. I'm also the chair of the TAM Foundation. And I spoke with Leslie last night. So I just wanted to reiterate for expediency some of the points that I was raising in that conversation, because you can't talk outside this meeting, so we might as well just address it here. A couple of things I was just thinking. The question was, how do I feel about the parcel tax? And obviously, the TAM Foundation supports our administration at our site. So we'll support whatever our administration brings to us and staff in terms of funding needs. But regarding this format and meeting, I would just love to see way more numbers. And for the benefit of our parents to get behind a parcel tax, that there's a 10-year budget you just mentioned, that you have a budget, that the gap will close with enrollment. And so my question is, what contribution, percent contribution is enrollment? What percent contribution is the increasing pension obligation? And then we see building replacement. And so those numbers are appropriate, and you have those numbers. And so I don't attend these meetings regularly, but that's the kind of numbers that would need to be provided for us to be excited to volunteer and work on this type of project. And I haven't heard yet the discussion about Plan B. So when this does fail in November, there's a Plan B, and does that start now? Are the cuts to commence now? Is a reserve sufficient until the 19 or the 16 million comes on in November, or will Plan B begin now? So that was, I believe, the LCAP mandate. And so the relevancy for us is if parents are going to weigh in on what should be trimmed, we have no numbers. So we don't know any numbers about what any of the we don't even know the names of the programs. I mean, like, there's athletics and there's wellness and there's other programs. But people have strong opinions, but the opinions are, you shouldn't hear opinions until the opinions are gauged against what the costs are for these different programs. So I just want to emphasize that you, please provide numbers for programs, how they look on your budget, and so that we could form better opinions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just real
Yes.
quick on that for clarification, and thank you, Ethan, for being here tonight. The board will get more information of this with the resolution coming for second interim, but in the early conversations, in conversations with the county, we are looking at multi-million-dollar reductions in the budget, somewhere on the order of about $3 million next year and roughly $4 million the year after. That's the range we're looking at. Like everything else, those numbers are projected against a static point in time, but it gives for the county office a sincere effort to reduce the structural deficit. And as was shared when Tarina Mars was here a few meetings ago, this is done outside the scope of any kind of revenue measure. They don't allow us to incorporate that. What we plan to do, what I plan to do for the board in the June resolution, which will be more specific, and at that point, hopefully we do have a decision with regards to all of this information tonight, timing, sizing, escalator, and all that. In the June, we'll have language that would indicate the level of reductions that the board would have to act on should a parcel tax not pass, because they would, like, as you say, want to know a Plan B. So the Plan B would be within the structure of a the June resolution to take place hypothetically, this is hypothetical, shortly after the results of the November election, because at that point we would know, and the county office would understand that that's an important time frame for us to not act prematurely, but at the same time have a clear indication. So for March, we'll have some broad numbers in the multi-million-dollar range in each of those out years. What I recall is roughly 3 and 4 million. And then for June, more specifics with the outcome from the LCAP group, fiscal advisory group, of what that would look like to bring us to those benchmarks.
So, David, Ethan raised another issue, maybe alluded to it, which was the idea, we've talked about this in terms of timing. So if we were on the November ballot, right, we would be increasing there would be a delay in terms, we wouldn't automatically, get our increase, because has to be incorporated into the notice of property tax assessments. So when would we start collecting the additional funds?
In the 1920 fiscal year.
The 1920, the July 1 to June 30.
Yeah, It would come in
Right.
with the billing for that fiscal year.
Right.
And I should clarify for disclosure, that was the recommended advice from the tax collector. In personally meeting with I think his name is Dan McAllister, legally, you could go out to collect it in the current year. You would make a lot of property owners quite flustered. Again, because they would have likely paid the first installment. So basically, there's an adjustment. He called it an adjustment to your property tax. And he says, you won't make a lot of friends if you do that. And so his recommendation is to do it in the subsequent fiscal year. So I want to be clear that technically, you could do it in the same year. The advice from the tax collector is to do it in the following fiscal year.
Because the property tax bills would already have been mailed,
Right.
and we would have to send a supplemental property
Correct.
tax assessment.
On a November ballot, they prepare, from what I'm told, they prepare this in the summer. So in June, they're already preparing for the possibility that it passes in November for the following year. So they can prepare for that. In June, they cannot, because they're already going with the assumption that it they don't know the results yet. So yes, so I want to be clear that in November would be for the 1920 fiscal year. The June, he said we would be able to do it in that year. They're able to make the adjustments before they actually get mailed.
But that's something that remains on the table. I recall at the workshop you describing that, and it meant that we were going to have to make more substantial cuts sooner, and we'll want to weigh the cost benefit of doing that.
Correct.
We may want to still send it out, I assume. Can you also speak to the other question, and is it in terms of actually getting more dollar, costs of various programs? The board would be interested in that as well. Will that be available by June or March timeframe?
By June, certainly. And in answering Ethan's comment about a desire to know more information with regards to the numbers, so as I go to the schools and hold these budget town halls, for lack of a better term, that is where I will share more of the numbers and give the landscape similar to what the board heard at the workshop for the fiscal. But out of that, as the information gets collected back from these groups, I will then work with Terry Ryland to quantify those. So I need to collect it all first so that I and my administrative team can look and see if we can group this in such a way to then quantify it and bring that forward by June. Hopefully, we can have information ahead of that so there's dialogue, but certainly by June, the board will have to make a decision on that. And there's two meetings. Typically, the first one is sort of the informational, and the second one is the decision with regard. That's still the plan.
So you'll be able to tell us what a certain program costs and how much you're recommending cutting that program costs?
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's helpful.
Ethan had another question about the reserve, too.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, because the points were addressed in my conversation with Leslie. I want to make sure that we're on the same page, which was the communication from Dr. Yoshihara to the district parents, that it needs to be substantive and fact-based, and so that we can either feel compelled to act or it's just informational. So I was just rereading your November 1st memorandum, and then there was one mid-February. And so just to kind of there were numbers in there, but there wasn't really numbers that led to a conclusion that that as parents we need to act, because we're all here to help. So help us help you, that's what we're trying to get to. So just really is more you can do that. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. It's very helpful.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Cacaro-Alman. I'm a Tam High parent, Mill Valley parent. I'm actually also the executive vice president of the Tam High Foundation. So I just want to reiterate the calls for a little more clarity with regards to numbers that Ethan has mentioned. And there are two other points I'd like to make. Some of this comes as being an alumni of sort of the Mill Valley School District and our experience most recently with their past two parcel taxes. And there was an incredible communication from our school district about what was happening and why we were required to go out to parents to ask. And I don't think that that has really happened yet here. And in addition, what Mill Valley did is they talked about shared solutions. And so if you go back and you look at many of the communications from the district at that time, it was about what parents were going to be asked to do, which was this parcel tax measure. That's what voters and parents were asked to do in order to maintain the high quality level of education that we receive here in the Tam Union High School District, and in that case, the Mill Valley School District. And that outlined not only what parents were asked to do, but what teachers were going to help contribute, and what certified staff were going to help contribute, and what the board was going to help contribute, for that matter, how their fiscal management was going to be clearer, and we were going to have more communication about what was happening. So I would suggest that that really worked well in Mill Valley from the standpoint of a voter and a parent. I think that the more information, the better. Yes, you can dumb people down with too many numbers, but in this case, when you're coming again and again, and we've seen these measures fail, in Kentfield, almost fail in Mill Valley, I worry about voter fatigue, and I worry about property tax, parcel tax fatigue. The other thing that I was going to talk about really quickly is the other thing that Mill Valley did, which was controversial but worked quite well, is they instituted residency checks in our district. And I know that sounds absolutely terrible, but there was a significant amount of savings that was generated because we had children from San Francisco who were going to school in Mill Valley for a very long period of time. And I'm certainly not one to deny children education, but I do think that as a district, we need to look at things like that because we're all being asked to foot the bill for a fabulous education, and there are people from other districts who are taking advantage of it. And so I do think that that's something we also need to think about. So what is the board going to do also to help us step up to the plate? Because we're constantly, I think the 100% is frankly ridiculous to ask parents to foot the bill and voters to foot the bill for all of this. I think we as a community and as a district, teachers, parents, educators need to come together to talk about shared solutions and how we can solve this problem together. So I thank you for your leadership, and we are here to support you in everything you do, and we will be at the table with you the whole time, certainly, but I do think communication is really important, particularly in this environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Dan Oppenheim, parent of a daughter here at Redwood as a sophomore. Surprised to hear the discussion about the 50%, the 100%, and in some ways I wish Jessica Crabtree were still here at this point, math teacher, not to discuss the issues she addressed, but to address this, and that yes, there haven't been numbers, but also not one member of the board has mentioned the actual dollar numbers here. We're talking about either an increase of 285 or an increase of 143. When we compare it to Kentfield's what, 1,500? Mill Valley's what, 980? So the total here would be 570 if you go with the 100% increase. So not such a big number from that standpoint. So just would want to consider that. If you ask someone about a parcel tax increase and say, do you want to double it? They might say no. If you say, can you handle a 285 increase versus 143? You might have a very different response. And so I guess the concern is that the recommendation is to go with 50 or 143 rather than 285. And is that an issue of just not having the courage to go out and say, let's see what we can do? You don't want to go out and ask for this several years from now. Just get it done once, go for 10 years and have it done. Going with 143 doesn't even cure the current deficit at this point. So why not at least get something that would cure that? I guess in thinking about these surveys, people are pliable. We can have shifting opinions. We can have more people showing up to vote if there's awareness of the issue, if there are numbers in terms of what the needs are in the enrollment. And clearly people moved here because of the schools. And now, so you have an issue of increasing demand, and you're saying we're going to cut back on the funding for it, not even just on a per capita basis, but on an absolute basis, which is quite perplexing. And so we look at it and say, people believe in the schools, and it seems that the community is probably more committed and believing more in the schools than the board actually realizes at this point. And I'd actually say, think about going for the 285 rather than 143.
Thank you.
Hi, My name is Tricia Lacey. I live in Larkspur, and I don't yet have kids in high school. My kids are 2nd grade, 5th grade, and 7th grade. And I'm here because a friend forwarded me the email that you sent. And I wish that the room was actually filled with more of my peers, because all of this is going to affect our kids much more actually than the kids who are currently in high school. So I'd like to talk about outreach. That one, this message that you sent should go to all of the parents with kids in the district, not just the parents of kids who currently have high schoolers. And I would like the message to have more information and more specifics, as several other people in the audience have requested. I did go through the packet, and the enrollment numbers don't even carry my child through high school. So the enrollment numbers end at 2021. And my guess is you can probably make some good assumptions about what those enrollment numbers are going to be. And also, speaking about enrollment, you used the language that there was unexpected enrollment growth. And I just find that language shocking, because I have been attending my local board meetings. I do have 2 of our excellent board members here, and we've been dealing with enrollment issues for the last 8 years. So it's obvious that those children are going to trickle up into the high school district and cause enrollment issues. And then in terms of the amount, whether it's 50, 100%, I definitely agree with the previous speaker that if we're going to go after a parcel tax, let's make sure that we actually cover the deficit that we're trying to tackle. And I'm also wondering if there are plans in place to potentially have a bond measure that will deal with facility issues, and if so, to have that conversation now as well, so there is full transparency in terms of what voters are going to be asked to do. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Corey.
Hi, I'm Corey DeMars. I'm a counselor at San Andreas High School and president of the TAM Teachers Union. My question is around a timeline. If I understood you correctly, David, you said that there was an expectation and a variable. The variable is that there's been no agreements or settlements made with the unions and the district at this point in time. So that's a variable that's out there that we just don't know the answer to yet. The expectation that you mentioned, and that I think we've all heard here tonight, is that the community really wants some very clear numbers around what kinds of cuts the district is going to make. And yet, if I understand it correctly, the majority of that decision-making or recommendation will come from LCAP and in their final recommendations around June. So if I understand this correctly, haven't you then by default eliminated the June ballot? Because if the expectation is that people understand what the district is doing to cut back expenditures, but they won't get that information until June, then I'm not sure how we can expect to be able to consider June ballot as a real viable option. So it's more a wonder than anything, and perhaps I'm not understanding it all correctly, but if I am, then perhaps you can address that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So June is there's a timing challenge obviously here. So to picture this, the board is well aware that they must adopt a budget by June. So as we move forward through this, and let's hypothetically say we consider a June ballot. For us to know the results with any certainty could require anywhere from a matter of days to weeks if it's a very close situation. The certification, I'm told, takes, and Jill can probably chime in, weeks, if not perhaps longer. So for us to be able to then act on that before the board has to adopt a budget is going to be challenging. I can certainly talk with Tarina at the county office to see the expectations with regards to a June proposal and what their expectation of us is in terms of planning for that. We can certainly plan as if it didn't pass, because that's sort of the de facto default, assuming, again, no revenue measure. But how do we adjust it if it does pass? So let me back up. So then what would happen for June is if the board decides to consider, or let's at this point say to go for a June ballot measure, we could bring forward to the best that we can, the board, the list, for lack of a better term, ahead of that. Let's say, going out a little bit here, maybe earlier in May, so that they can assess the impact of those cuts ahead of a revenue measure. So there's a timing challenge with regards to a June ballot and a June budget adoption, because as you can imagine, for us to present the budget in June, Terry and others know the work takes place months ahead of time. So they're preparing and planning, and all of these numbers get figured out and calculated. For us to spin on a dime on that is going to be more challenging. So I can certainly talk that with the county office if the board wants to consider that. But at the same time, there's a timing issue. As Jill presented, we have a March 6th or so deadline for June. So those are rapidly approaching. I think it's fair to also clarify that our next regular meeting is March 13th. So it will require a meeting that isn't posted per se. Not that we wouldn't follow all the rules of Brown Acts, but the board would have to consider the manner in which they chose to have that meeting, because it is the next regular meeting is March 13th.
Hi, my name is Sarah Mueller. I'm the parent of a freshman here at Redwood and 2 future Redwood students. I'm also the president of the Larkspur-Corte Madera School District Board of Trustees. But my comments here tonight are just my own personal comments. One, on the timing, my personal opinion is November would be better. I think we as a community really need to educate the rest of the community about what the needs of the district are, how school finance works. I think we're seeing a lot of comments, at least I've seen a lot on Nextdoor and in the IJ with respect to Kentfield's parcel tax, our own districts, the high school TAM district's issues, and even with Novato's potential budget cuts. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there about how school funding works and what some of the problems are and what things like parcel taxes can pay for. So I think you should really take the extra time to educate the community with a clear, concise message and a lot of transparency. And I think a little bit more time will also give you a chance to show the community that you have the ability to make cuts where necessary and that you're willing to make difficult choices and look at anything that could be cut without simply going and expecting the community to just fund whatever the board asks for. With respect to the escalator, I think our school district's parcel tax that we passed 2 years ago has a fixed escalator. It's not tied to cost of living. And one thing that, we considered a number of factors, but one is our operating expenditures, like the TAM districts, are increasing by more than COLA each year. So the pension costs and especially increasing enrollment make your costs go up more than COLA each year. So there is a justification for looking at a fixed and potentially larger escalator. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a comment. I agree. I think that many people in Mill Valley who are maybe opposed to the giant parking structure that's planning to go up outside of TAM, they need to know that the parcel tax is separate than the facilities bond. So just getting that information out there will be very crucial. That's my 2 cents.
No, that's a good point. Before we discuss these issues again, does anyone else have a comment? So I think I'll bring it back to the board, but if any of you think of something, I'll try and keep my eye out. I mean, we'll have to be done before I open it up again, but your comments have been really helpful. My understanding, Dr. Yoshihara, our goal for tonight is to first take action that yes, we are going to go out for a parcel tax. When we're going out for a parcel tax, the size, and then whether, and the length and the term. The escalation, is that something we decide tonight, or is that something we can wait? What is it that, I want to get a better feel of what we can try and accomplish tonight.
If we are considering June,
Mhm.
we would have to have decisions on all of that tonight so
Okay.
that we could draft for review it. What would David pointed out would have to be a special meeting in March.
Okay.
If we are going in November, direction, as much direction from the board as possible would be very helpful so that we can start to develop the measure and the public education that a lot of the community is asking for around how that would impact the school's finances for budget town halls and community meetings.
Okay,
as
thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Good. So how about we do this? Let's first see if we can come to an agreement and even take a vote on whether we want to go out in June or November, and then it'll trickle down from there. Then we'll be able to go through each of these items and get a temperature of how everyone is looking at it and get as much done as we can. But if we think we need more information, for instance, on the size or the escalator, then we won't know until we determine whether we all think we want to go out in June or November. That was a long way of saying, let's just decide on, it happens to be around this time. I need my cup of coffee, I apologize. So I'll open it up, and I don't know that does anyone here want to go out in June, knowing that one of the clarifications was that we would have the option, even though the county has recommended we not do it, of sending out a tax bill sooner. Before, when we were looking at this, I think we were looking at it in terms of June being really difficult to get the cash in hand, and that was the disadvantage of doing it in November. But
Can
I'll
I just
just open it
clarify
up.
real quick?
Sure.
June, the county is fine with collecting cash in the next fiscal year. It's November that they're recommending.
I said it backwards,
Yeah.
and so we were automatically assuming November we couldn't, but that I thought that Dan said, I recommend you not sending out an extra tax bill.
For
It'll make
November.
people unhappy, but we may have to make people, I mean, we may have to, that'll be part of our education, that we're going to have to do that. I'm getting the looks. Okay, I'll go get coffee and I'll be back.
I think November makes more sense for all sorts of reasons. We don't get the money as quickly, but I think we've been hearing for a long time that our outreach, there's room for improvement there. We know that from our board self-evaluation. I think that, March 9th is
Too soon.
in 10 days, and
Okay.
I'm not sure that we are at a point where we feel really solid about going out and
Okay.
having run the parcel tax campaign last time. It took us 11
you-
months
Okay.
to do it well.
Does anyone have anything to add to that or counter it? I mean, anything different than what Laura just said?
I just, I want to amplify it. There's just so little time between now and June that it would be at best frenetic and disorganized. But I think we do need to recognize that if we go for November, we're leaving, $5.5 million on the table. That's, $5.5 million we won't be able to collect for next year. Which for me is, it's really, really difficult to do that because it's going to necessitate cutting stuff. We just can't,
Right.
we're going to have to eliminate programs, but I don't think we can organize to the extent that we can, that we can be confident about passing the parcel tax in June. And I don't want to be on the ballot with Kentfield.
Okay.
Well, I don't think we'd be on the ballot with Kentfield. They're having a special election.
Oh, it is special
So
election?
unless you move to Kentfield, we are not going to be on the ballot.
Okay.
with Kentfield.
Oh, I didn't realize, I thought they were
They're
going to be in
mailing
June.
next week.
Kempfield's in March, Dixie is in May.
Yeah, I was
So-
wondering if it was legal to have all those signs out this early.
It is legal.
So as we
For
move
June.
forward in our discussion now, as of now, we've reached some consensus, watching Michael and Barbara, that November will be the day, the month that we go out for the parcel tax. So with that, let's consider size, escalation, and term, and decide which of these we're ready to make a decision on, and if there's any in particular we would like more information. I was influenced by some of the speakers, so I'm curious how you all, where would you like to start? Should we start with the size?
I think that we, you know, if we go in November, then I think we have a little bit of a cushion to determine the size. You know, I would like to think perhaps about something a little bit north of 50%.
Mm-hmm.
You know, granted, we're not going to have polling on that.
Right, but what your point being, we have more time with the education and outreach, that it would, if they were to do a poll again, it would probably be more leaning towards being successful, that we could go above 50. So somewhere between 50 to 100. And I really appreciate the comment about the dollar value versus percentage. And now I'll turn over to my right and ask the three of you. And then I want to ask the two of you what you think.
So I actually wanted, she's in the back before she leaves, Tricia, is that what her name is?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, okay, she's gone, so.
Okay. She looked like Tricia from the, yeah.
That's all right. That's all right. We'll follow up with her. Sorry, Leslie.
Oh, I'm rubbing off on you. You're.
No, I
I'll
just
get
wanted,
you
she
coffee
made
too.
this comment about the enrollment growth being unexpected, and
Oh.
there's nothing unexpected about the enrollment
No,
growth.
we've
We had
known it
an
was
enrollment
coming.
growth subcommittee back in,
Right.
you know, I just found the report again back in June.
Yeah.
We had demographers who were
Yeah, we had a
retained
special.
as part of
yeah.
our, you know, we paid for demographic studies as part of the facilities master
Yeah.
plan. So, you know, we know that enrollment growth has been faced by our feeder districts.
We've been watching this pretty
This
closely.
is not a surprise.
No, not at all.
So we're dealing with it, but it's just not a surprise. So that should be really clear to everybody.
Right.
I'll make a quick comment, clarification. There's been some comment versus the percent versus the dollar amount. I don't know, Jill, but I recall Godby sharing this, and I believe it's accurate. The actual language on the measure will be a dollar amount. The new laws, the percentage we're using is a convenience term, just because it's convenient. The actual measure in the testing was tested. You saw it there. They used dollar amounts in the testing, and I believe you have to use dollar amounts as again, there was transparency to the voter. So when we use 50 and 100, that's more of just a casual, just for ease of understanding. But when we actually test and when we actually do it, it'll all be numbers, amounts, and that's when he got into the psychometric last time about the 199, the 149, and so forth.
So the commenter, it makes even more sense, and I appreciate your comment. Somebody else said, and I think you as well, that because I think you call it psychometrics.
Yeah. For lack of a better term.
That's good. So we don't want to hit 500, but I think so. It was clearly 499 or a little below. But that means we could increase it from 143 to 274, and maybe this is something I want to entertain again. Whereas before public comment, I thought, no, 50%.
Can we pull up the ballot question again?
Yeah.
Sorry, Mary. But so a couple of things. One is we have been using the terms 50% and 100%. That was based on financial analysis that David presented at a meeting, I believe in December, of what 50% would mean to the district over the next 5 to 10 years. versus the deficit spending and then 100%. And the board decided that it wanted to look at those two. So I just want to clarify for people that those numbers had meaning. There was math and science math behind them that the district did. And what we've been trying to do is create a section on the website where we put all this information. And I know that it's been an uphill, we've been doing it not as quickly as probably people would like, but I think we can do better. And so I think that's one of the documents we can add to that site. And I encourage people to send questions in, and then we can add more information to that page so that we're being as responsive to the community as possible. So that was piece one. And piece two is we have been using these terms 50%, 100%. The voter will never see that. What they will see is what you see here, which is we are renewing the local funding at the current 285, which is the current rate of our parcel tax. That can't change. So the number we're talking about is the 143, right? So adding 143. And what Brian said, and I agree with, is, without actually having tested it, that we could probably go up to like 149 without really impacting the vote. But that going any higher than that would put us into territory that we didn't really know how the voters would feel about it. And given that we're not starting with a lot of cushion, that we felt that going any higher than 149 could be detrimental to our vote and could put us in a position where we would end up with no money.
Can I also add, we also know that there was discussion at the time around the sort of 75-25 threshold, these other quartile markings. And in conversation as we got down to the polling, you look, from what I gather is you lose too much reliability because we're already split sampling. The 600, by the time you split sample so far down, it becomes an unreliable indicator. So we, again, decided, because we're testing a number of scenarios and so on and so forth, to add in these 25, 75, it became unreliable. So that's why we chose, working with the board during that time, the 143 and the 286.
Right, and we did a regression at the end to test cost of living versus not, and 15 versus 12 versus 9, and did not see a significant difference in the vote when we did that regression. But we only were able to test with accuracy 2 amounts. That is correct.
Does anyone remember how many parcels are in the district? I want to say like 33,000, 34,000.
I think she's done the math already on what the difference between 143 and 149 would be.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. It's like 200,000.
Could you speak in the microphone?
Yes. Sorry, hi, Terry Ryland. Luckily, I ran a couple of reports last week when I was here. So we get about, actually just under, is in the current year budget, $10 million. So, which actually makes the math really simple. And so you divide by 285, we have about 35,000 parcels. And the difference between 143 and 149 is $210,000. So that's not nothing. So it's about, every dollar would be $35,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be your increment going up financially.
And those are the parcels we collect from, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So there are more parcels, obviously, with exemptions.
Right.
So what about the compounding, right? Because this is, right, if we extend this out, 3%, then 3% on top of the 3%. So have we done that analysis? Do we know what these numbers are going to look like 5 years out and, at the end of this? Because they are, even though from a ballot perspective, it's nice to be able to say $143 increase, right? But by the time we're done, right, the amount of this parcel tax is going to be, right, because of the impact of compounding is going to be substantial. Have we done that kind of analysis to see where we end up at the end of 10 years, where we end up at the end of 15 years?
143 would be 192 after 10 years.
But that's not the number, though. I'm talking about what the, right, because it's 285 plus 143 plus 3% every year, right? What's it going to look like on somebody's property tax assessment, right? What are they going to, what's the number that everybody's going to be paying?
I did this on a sticky note at home, and I don't have it. But I did the escalator. I assumed 3%. And after 12 years, I did not pick 15. I think we were Well, it's like $650 per parcel. Don't quote me on that. I had.
I'm just, it's been done for proposed measures, so I'm looking at Dixie's, for example, which is 470, which is higher than ours. They've done the escalator out 10 years, so 470 goes to 613. So that's higher than us, but my guess is, and math is not my strong suit.
You could do it.
575 if you add in the 285 and the 143 as a starting point, 3% a year, annually for 10 years, you get about 575.
For 10 years.
Yeah. So for 12, I think I was right. It's going to be higher than that.
Yeah.
Right. So what are you looking for feedback from the board, Leslie? Which issue are you looking for right now?
The how
The
big is
size. Are you convinced, after hearing the clarification, that we should stick, I understand we don't say 50% in the ballot, but we should stick with the 143? Or do you think we should push it above 149, even though that's what they recommended, not going above?
149 brings us $200,000.
Yeah, so that's something there.
Well, let's hear from our expert. We pushed last at the last meeting, and now we've had additional input. We have additional information. Has your opinion changed?
No. I would not go
Yeah,
above
she said
149.
149, yeah.
Yeah. I came up $6 from last time. I mean, I appreciate the significant difference, and I do think, obviously, there are people in this community, I mean, the polling showed that, there are people in the community that would support more money, but not 2/3. And I think that the lift to get to 2/3, unfortunately, is the reality that we live in, is just too hard at a higher number.
So do you want to consider 143 versus 149? Is that where we're going to bracket it, or do you want to just stick with 143? Does anyone on the board want to say?
I'm happy with listen, if Jill is the one who's going to, I'm hoping is bringing us sort of the political realities, right? I mean, in part, you have to think about who we're hearing from, right? The people who we're hearing from.
Right, no, I get
The public
that.
who we're hearing from, who we appreciate, right? But obviously, you guys are.
Definite yes.
You guys are the supporters, right? You're the backbone of community, right? The people, right, who got up and spoke, right, from the foundations and, right, and serve on other school boards, people, right? You guys are right, you are the backbone of community support for us. So, but the political reality is we're reaching out to a much broader audience. We need to make sure we're not just talking to ourselves, right? So I think that's why we go through all this polling.
Right. So Jill, could you remind us, out of the voters, what percentage, it's a pretty high percentage of them that don't have children in the district?
I don't remember the number. We pulled it in the poll, but I think it was like 20% have school-age children, something like that. Please don't quote me on that. I'm happy to pull the poll results, if that's helpful, or Michael, if you want to pull it up. But it was a small percentage.
It was very small. I mean, that's why, going to Michael's point, is that we're hearing from people in our community, you know, if.
Yeah, there's a difference. I think what we asked in the poll was if you had school-aged children, and then within that, we did an age breakdown, I think. And I just want to say that to have the kind of support that you have here tonight is a really good sign. Usually in a situation like this, you're going to get a lot of diverse opinions, both for and against, and what you're getting is for an increase or for a greater increase. So that's a good, one of the things that we said we needed to do in order to win is have unanimous support of the school family, and knowing that we have that is a really good sign.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing that number in the report. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong report, or I'm just not finding it.
It's in the Godby one.
I'm looking at the Godby
The
one.
actual, not the PowerPoint.
I think
Oh, not the PowerPoint.
Not the PowerPoint, you need his actual,
If you give me a minute,
Okay.
hopefully this will work.
it's in his actual.
And some of it was age-related too. It was a very high percentage, was over 60, I thought.
Yeah, it's over 50% of it.
Yeah.
It's a high.
So, the other thing here is, we represent a more diverse community.
Right, we represent not just the parents of this community.
Right, well, not just the parents, but geographically
Right,
and
it's huge,
socioeconomically,
yeah,
right? We represent
right.
a more diverse community
Right.
than some of the other
74,000.
school districts.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we see, I mean, let's just look really, just compare the amount of money that the Redwood Foundation raises to the amount of money that the Drake Fund raises. Just, right, that's just one little data point. I mean, it's pretty, there's a significant difference. And so we need to be mindful, I think, of not just the electoral, the political issues, but the fact, literally the economic impact on community-wide of, coming up with another, X hundred hours per year.
That's what's nice about the poll. I mean, it gives us a sense of the greater community.
So for the November 2018 election, of those polled, 40% had children under the age of 18 living in their household. Of that 40%, about 65% were 14 to 17 years old, and the rest would be younger than 14. And there's a breakdown. I think it was 25% was 12 to 13, 28% was 5 to 11, and then of that number, also 73% are in public, and then 12% private, 2.5% charter. So all of which is to say is we start with 40% who have under 18 children in the house, and then it goes down from there as far as whether they have kids in the school, in our school district, in the high school district, public versus private, et cetera.
Okay.
But it's sort of a high marker of about 40% of the voting population for November.
Do we need more discussion on the 143? Is there somebody out there? Would you like to come to the podium? Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, my name is Dory Leifer, and I'm a parent of a ninth grader at Redwood, and have a younger daughter that's moving up in the system. And I'm a Greenbrae resident, so we're in the Kentfield district. I'm just curious if it would make more sense to defer this decision for another week, given that the Kentfield ballots are sitting on people's tables right now. And I'm also a volunteer on the process to canvass from door to door. So no doubt I'm going to be asked many questions about what the high school district is up to. And I'm a little concerned that this is potentially confusing the issue when we have something like 8 days to go before the ballots are due. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just on the issue of timing generally, it sounds like the board has decided not to consider June, in which case we have time. So if the board wanted to come back at a later meeting, possibly post, the March special election to make this final decision, but just generally our recommendation and what we've been discussing in the working group is that we are hopeful that the board will be able to decide early, because we want to be able to have time to communicate to the public. We want the community to have time to put together an independent campaign, and we want other districts and other, there are other county-wide interests looking at the November ballot to know that we intend to place a measure. So while it is true that we don't have to make the decision tonight, though I wouldn't discourage you from doing so, I do recommend that you do it sooner rather than later.
I want to make the decision tonight.
But I think if we have decided, sounds like that we haven't made a motion or taken action, but if we send it out there that we're going to be on the ballot in November, details to follow, we can get that message out to the broader community that Tam's going to be on the ballot in November, and we can start gathering our team, even without the details, can't we?
Yeah, and what we're asking tonight is not for you to approve to place a measure on the ballot. That requires a formal resolution that we would need to draft with legal counsel with very specific, based on the polling, we want to amend the ballot question slightly. What we're asking tonight is the board to provide direction to us and to staff to start preparing a measure for your review and approval. So it's not the final decision, if that helps.
Okay, so I heard that comment, and I'm sensitive to it. I think that we've spent so much time sort of gathering input, and we're not going to be meeting again for a while, and frankly, we postponed a lot of other, agenda setting. We have a lot of other items on the agenda, right? We cleared off our agenda just for this tonight, so I'm just not sure that it's really in our interest to kick the can much further down the road, even if we don't make the formal decisions. You're looking for effectively a strong sense of the board tonight.
For the board to direct us to
Yeah.
develop a measure
Right.
with
Right.
specific, right, so
Okay. So why don't, okay, so I think what we're hearing is 149. So we've, right, we had, November, we seem to have a consensus,
Well, 143 or 149.
right? But do we, right, but,
Yeah.
okay, do we have any objection to 149?
No, I like the extra 200,000.
Yeah, I don't have
Chuck?
any objection.
250,000, I don't want it.
Okay,
I think I'll.
is anybody interested in moving higher than 149 at this stage?
No.
I'm deferring to our professionals and all the comments I've heard, yeah, no.
Okay.
Okay, so what's next on your list?
Oh, and the escalator.
Escalator.
Well, what about the term?
term.
Well, we could
I'm
do
for
either one
3% flat.
Yeah.
3% flat,
Yeah.
I agree with a flat escalator.
okay.
I'm on board with the flat. 3%, no higher.
Okay.
Now 10 or 15-year term,
Or 12.
Or
or
12.
12.
We pulled 12.
We polled 15. Those are these numbers are based on 15 years. Then we did a regression to 12 and 10 and did not see a significant difference. That being said, if the board does not feel comfortable with 15 based on conversations with stakeholders who are going to be important parts of, a community outreach campaign, there would be no, there would be no significant issue with dropping back to 10 or 12. 12, there are a number of there's one other measure two other measures that 12. Mill Valley has a 12-year measure, and Dixie's current proposed measure is 12 years. But again, that didn't seem to matter in the polling.
I like 12. We already have a couple districts out there, and I'm really uncomfortable with 15. But 12 means that we don't have to go out again, theoretically, for a long time. And it does give our voters a chance to weigh in before the 15 years is up.
I can go with that as well. How about you, Chuck?
What'd you say?
12 year.
I'm for 15.
Okay, so Chuck's for 15, Laura and I are for 12. Let's get a polling of you two, and then we'll discuss it.
I'm a little on the, I would rather go shorter. I want to go 10.
So we have 110,
Really?
2 12s, and 115. Michael, pressure is on.
Really? You're interested, I thought you were interested, you started out at 100% in
Right.
June. And now you've gone
100% June, 10 years.
I also want to give us the option of, at some point, because we are going to see further down the road here, given assumptions that we are going to be making that will be different, I'd like to see us have that. Somebody else is going to have it, the option of going out. Yeah, I think we're going to have to.
So she's just raising the point that whatever you pick will be the ballot that the likely renewal committee is looking at. So if you picking an even year guarantees that it's going to be on the ballot as a re-election for board members, but it also guarantees that we can continue to do it in an even year, which is higher turnout. So
We're going to have, you have to
gonna-
understand,
yeah.
we're going to have re-elections for board members in even years going forward. That's the state law
New
Correct.
law.
now. So whether we pick 12 or 10, I mean, I guess if we
right,
pick,
if you pick 13 though,
right,
stay in an even year.
yes. Okay, I agree with that.
You can have 12 if you want.
I would stay in an even year. Oh, I see, with the 15. Okay.
My pitch for 15 is that the fewer times you have to roll the dice and go to the voters, the better you are.
Chuck, this is such a good experience as a board member to have to go through this process. Don't you want, isn't there some kind of gift that you want to bestow on your successors?
I get the sense you guys aren't enjoying my company.
Don't we have anti-hazing rules in this district?
You know, someone once made an argument to Abraham Lincoln about the importance of posterity, and he said, posterity never cast any votes. So I think we should do 12 years, right? I mean, I think
Okay,
it's.
good. So that's 3 against 2.
No, Barbara said 12.
Oh, four against 1.
Go do it.
Okay.
Fine, okay.
Okay, so now, oh, we did it.
That's it.
We did it.
Okay. we got
Okay,
it.
we did it.
Democracy in action.
And so I need to ask you, I want clarification. What, I know we've got the numbers figured out, so the motion will be to direct staff to begin, develop a,
A resolution for
Resolution.
approval by the board that would place a measure on the November ballot with the parameters, thank you, that you have outlined here tonight. And we will work with David and legal counsel to draft that. So that would include the 75-word ballot question, the longer resolution that would be in part of the ballot handbook, using the polling data. And then we'll start work on what a public education effort could look like between March and November.
And we've
So-
only got you on the payroll for 1 more month, so we want to
yeah, we need to get moving.
work you hard to get as much from you as we can in terms of direction.
Oh, we have one more comment. Yes, thank you.
So that's our number.
I guess I just didn't want to overlook the comment that if we're going to go out for a parcel tax, that we should actually go out for one that will solve the problem. And if we go out for less than that, it would seem to me that then you have to cut more. If you're not getting enough new revenue to come in, then you have to cut more programs. So I guess my question is, when have we cut so much out of the district that we fundamentally have changed who we are as a district? And yet we're going out to people asking them to support us maintaining our excellence as a school district. So I guess I'm asking about what is the correlation between the more you have to cut and you're not pulling in enough income to decrease the number of cuts or put a shorter timeline on the cuts before you can bring things back. When does it finally get to a point where it's working against us and we're no longer providing an exemplary program to the very people that we're asking to pay for an exemplary program? I don't know if I've made my question clear on that. I guess I'm struggling with the idea that if the district is not going to go out for enough money to solve the problem, and that leads to more cuts, aren't we then undermining our reputation as an exemplary district to the very people that we just sold our exemplary program on and asking them to further support us financially? Does that make sense? Is that so? Can somebody address that? Yeah, thank you.
I have 30 seconds. Just one concern I would say, with all due respect, Jill, I think her firm would love to be able to say, we get measures passed. Whether it's the right measure or not, they want to get a measure passed. So I'd just be careful about taking a recommendation. Obviously, getting a lower number passed is easier than a higher number. In addition, I would just say, think about June versus November. If you skip June and include it soon, it means giving up that $5 million if you're talking about 143. And so if you go later, might need to get a little bit greedier if you want to maintain the quality. And then in addition, while there's talk of 20% of the families having students here, the reality is everyone benefits. If you talk to anyone in real estate, people don't pay up for bad schools. It's pretty clear. And so whether they have kids in school or not, they want their home values to stay flat or rising. And so to hack away at one of the primary reasons people would move to an area probably isn't a great thing.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump into it because I loved what you said, Corey, and that was so well said, and same with Dan. And that's why I was saying with regard to between 50 and 100% go out for that 65% or whatever, as it correlates to a number. So again, due respect to Jill, 149 being the buyer's appetite, I don't know, why isn't 158? Why isn't 163 as the additional? If that's going to get us what it is that we need to close the gap.
So, look, these are really, can I go ahead? Yeah, I mean, I think
Yes,
these,
you
I think these are, these are really good points, and we want to think aspirationally. I keep going back to, right to what we've said in the past, right, to Sydney, what Sydney was saying. But frankly, the fact that I think that we owe it to our constituents to examine our budget on the expense side and not just on the revenue side. I don't think we have credibility, frankly, unless we focus on the expense side as well. I do think that there is, I agree with Corey, your point, that I think at some point, if we change the character of the district because we're cutting so much, then, we're sort of, then we're arguably undercutting our argument, right, in favor of wanting, in favor of help us maintain and continue the fact that we're an exemplary district. But I think there's a lot of real estate between, some budget cuts that are necessary in terms of demonstrating our credibility, and frankly, the idea that we can't operate a little more efficiently. I mean, I don't buy that. I mean, I think we can, and so I think having some budget cuts as part of this is perfectly okay, and in part, it's not a bad discipline to have to go through every once in a while, is to say, where in our budget can we be more efficient from everybody? I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're going out to the teachers, right? I mean, and we're going to get, and you told me, you think we're going to get some good suggestions. So I don't know where, at what point do we cease to be an exemplary district and we undercut? I mean, I don't think we're going to get there. I think part of the problem that we have is we do know that our enrollment growth is going to level off, right? So if we were faced with 10 years of additional enrollment growth and we knew we were going to be, another 5% or 10% per year for the next 10 years, and we're passing something that doesn't deal with that issue, that would be a significant problem. But we know, when is it, 2022, we know that our enrollment growth is going to be leveling off. It doesn't mean that all our costs are going to be leveling off, but it does mean our enrollment growth is going to be leveling off, and it gets more difficult to make the argument to the voters, I think, and frankly, for us as a board at that point, that we, notwithstanding that we know that, we're going to go out for, 12 years at another $200 per parcel. So, I mean, I'm willing to discuss this some more. I don't know that 149 is magic. I don't want to undersell ourselves. But we are an exemplary district, and we're not going to stop being an exemplary district on our watch. And making some cuts is not going to mean that we're no longer going to be an exemplary district. I just, I don't think we're just not going to get there.
The way I look at it too is that with anything, you get to the point where you get your data, there's some uncertainty, and you just have to make a decision. And I do have to rely on the Godby poll. And as much as I too have gotten the sense that we have, you heard me change my mind up here a couple times. But now I'm going to have to just go and look at the facts in front of me. And if the consequences weren't so dire, if we don't pass this parcel tax, it's too much of a risk. I need to rely on the poll. I'm not willing to take that big of a gamble.
Yeah, and I think that the point that Michael just made, I wish I had made it because I was thinking about it too. And that is, if we go for a 12-year parcel tax, that takes us to 2030, when we, according to our demographics, will have, I think, fewer people than we have now. It's tailing off in 2022, and at that point, our voters are going to be paying a lot more than we're considering asking them for right now, because we will have escalated it. So then we're collecting a lot of revenue, and we have potentially fewer students. So the optics on that are something to consider.
Yeah. So the other thing is, if you pull up the poll, so I don't think we have here the PowerPoint for the 100% increase, so the $570 parcel tax. right? But when we got to the end, sort of the informed support, right? So when we were at the $428 number, the informed support was 70.9%, right? So we need 2/3, right? And we have a plus or minus 4% margin of error, right? So we're at the 2/3 there.
You're talking about the interim or at the end?
At the end, the informed.
So after positive, isn't it? Yes, the
After-
final test.
Right. So at 428, so we're right there on the cusp.
You're at 73 for November at
Oh,
420.
73, okay.
Yeah.
And
That's the 70.9 is the June number.
Okay, and for the 570, the number was 64.8.
Plus or minus.
Plus or minus 4%. So we
Correct.
weren't even at, so clearly, somewhere between, that 428 number and that 570 number, it starts to get really, really uncertain, right? I mean, that is a meaningful difference, 73% support versus 64.8% support, when we need 2/3.
And something else that Brian Godby pointed out a few times is to look at the lean number, right? So once the board decides to put the measure on the ballot, that's just the first step, right? That then the voters at large have to be informed that there's a measure on the ballot. They have to be convinced to vote for it. There has to be a large campaign. As we're seeing right now, there may be a back and forth. There's whether the newspaper. There are a lot of factors that need to come into play to solidify those leans, to make sure the undecideds don't go no. I mean, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So it's not, if we put it on the ballot, we're definitely going to get 73%.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I would say is, again, we're going to kick, for future boards, which is, interestingly enough, right, our current parcel tax doesn't expire until 2022. We're going out early because we think circumstances demand that we go out early. And if we're passing a 12-year parcel tax, and if a future board decides, right, if it turns out that our demographic projections are wrong, or we need something else, whatever it is, I mean, it doesn't prevent a future board from deciding to go out early and say we need more of a parcel tax. And the other thing is, frankly, we have this whole facilities issue, right? I mean, how many times are we going to go out? We got to think about that too, right? How many times are we going to go ask the voters with respect to go into their pockets? And it's a question of, it's a judgment call. And I love the fact that we have people who want to ask for more money, right? But it would be pretty meaningful to have another $5 to $6 million in revenue every year, even if it doesn't cover everything.
Are we ready for a motion?
Well, I'd like to make a couple of points. One is that magic 149 number doesn't appear anywhere on the ballot, does it? What we're...
Yeah,
it does.
So
That's
this
what
is your
shows
ballot question. This is what the voters will read and vote on. Then there's a longer sort of digest that goes along with it, which will include more detail. But what they would see is renew local funding, and this is approved by council. So approved local funding at the rate of 285. This is the larger one, and adding 285. And what we're suggesting here is adding 149 in that slot. So what they won't actually see in the 75 word question is the 570 or 420. I can't remember what the number was.
Okay, and the second point, not in direct response to Corey, it's not possible to make significant cuts to the budget without adversely affecting the educational program. You can cut a little bit here, a little bit there, but when you're talking about making significant cuts, it's going to adversely affect the educational program. And when we talk about, we can't really talk about efficiencies too much. There's an economic concept, Baumol's cost disease. Ann's probably might have taught it to her econ students. But we're operating in a labor-intensive environment. And, all this expansion and productivity and efficiency that we're seeing in, all these industries everywhere doesn't exist in teaching, because as the years progress, it's still going to take the same amount of time for Anne to correct a paper in her social studies class. And the cost of Anne goes up every year. The cost of teachers goes up. And if we're going to make cutbacks, we can't make the teachers more efficient. We can say, well, you ought to correct your papers in 10 minutes. But, at least for me, it was 3 papers an hour if I was really doing a decent job. That's not going to change. So this is going to adversely affect the educational program. There's just no getting around it.
But at the workshop, I thought you made the point that there were ways to look at programs that did cost more, and there might be a way to change those programs.
But you get rid of those programs.
So
that's what,
And so you're saying getting rid of a program would drastically hurt the education of the whole
Yes.
district?
Yeah, as we eliminate programs, we're going to.
I guess I haven't
negatively
heard that
affect
we're
the
doing
education.
drastic cuts as right after this parcel tax.
$2
I mean,
or $3 million
catastrophic.
is pretty drastic to me.
But after once we get cash in hand, are we still going to be cutting $3 million a year? Okay,
Let's
so
just
it is
talk-
3 million.
let's
I didn't
talk
think,
about
I thought
year-
we were, I
let's
thought that
talk
was
about
the first
one,
year.
Let-
Okay, I thought it was the first year that we were doing that, but
Yeah,
with the parcel
well,
tax, we were going to
and-
be able to
and
recoup some of that.
At the end of the year, we're going to have an inferior program than we had a year ago. That's inescapable.
So, other board members, do you want to rethink this based on?
I haven't changed my mind, but I'm just saying we need to go ahead with our eyes open.
Yeah.
And I think that, Leslie, your question about, if this parcel tax passes, which it's going to pass in November, and we get that additional income in 2019, we are going to look at ways to cut, but I don't know that we're going to have cuts of 3 million every year. I think
And that's why I asked that question.
I think initially we will. We have to prove to the Marin County Office of Education that we are prepared to do that.
But we also said that we would potentially send out a tax bill earlier rather than wait.
That's correct.
So that would also address that issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get part of it, yeah.
Because I don't think any of us want to have, it would be ludicrous if we're up here passing something that we're also saying it's going to have a catastrophic effect on the education.
I didn't say catastrophic, I said it's going to have a negative effect.
Oh, I thought you said catastrophic, okay.
No, I said catastrophic cuts will
Okay,
have a negative
okay,
effect.
okay.
I mean, the only
Okay, now I understand.
addition I have to that very valid consideration is if we go in November and we are not successful, then we're really looking at significant cut. I mean, that's the
what I
balance
said
here,
earlier,
right?
but I didn't want to gamble, and so
Right,
I'm.
that's the problem is.
Right. I don't think any of us want to have to make cuts, but I think what Michael was saying was true too, that we can always find efficiencies on a small scale. And I think that's the point that, we're looking at it right now.
And it's worth noting, the per pupil expenditures have been decreasing. For
Right,
several
we've
years
been,
now.
right.
And I think one of the parents from Mill Valley pointed out, that a lot of other school districts have gone to the ballot with sort of what I would call a shared responsibility message, which is the board is willing, it has looked at its finances and is looking at, making these level of cuts, which we think are sustainable, and we're asking the voters to meet us partway, and we have used that, I've seen boards do that in a number of school districts, and the voters have responded well to that. I think, what the polling shows us is that the voters at a 2/3 threshold just aren't willing to support all the revenue that the district would need. While there are, and I don't discount that there are, you know, a significant, I mean, there's 62% who do, that just doesn't get us to the 66.67 that we need.
I want to make a point, though, that you just mentioned about shared. We know that classified and certificated have already shared. They're piled up on each other in classrooms. That means they're limiting their student contact because they're in transit. We know that classified has lost positions, and we're going to need more, but those will be the areas where we're already sharing. At least teachers and staff are already taken up that burden. So I'd like that to be known. That's not a gonna be, that's happened already. And they did that without being asked, because they always do. And it's been going on for 3 years that I know of. So shared, yes, but it's gotta be the next share. They're already sharing.
So
Can I
August-
have, go ahead.
August 10th is our deadline to submit a ballot measure, right? I'm looking at
Sorry, say that
August 10th,
Yes.
the deadline to submit a
Correct.
ballot measure. But tonight you need direction
from
to
the
keep
board.
I was just
moving.
going to ask for a motion. Can I just read it?
Yeah.
Can I have a motion to direct the district superintendent and staff to develop a resolution to bring back for board approval to place a parcel tax on the November 2018 ballot for a value of $149 above the current 285 rate with an escalation of 3% for a term of 12 years?
3% per year.
Right.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
We're going to resume to closed session. Thank you.